Well, thanks. So this is very exciting for us here. So the themes of this event this year, so as you know, this is an annual conference. This year, what we're going to focus on, one is what's happening in Washington, D.C. and as it relates to mobility policy in particular. We're going to also have 2 sessions on automated vehicles. And as many of you know, I use automated instead of autonomous because autonomous is an abomination of the English language. If an autonomous vehicle is connected, is it still autonomous? No, I don't think so. So anyway, I'm going to be stubborn, call it automated. And then we're having a session on urban freight and automation. And we're going to have a session also later this morning on transit new mobility partnerships, which I will be moderating. So I do want to emphasize and highlight what a pivotal time this is in transportation history. You know, remember, we saw almost no systems level innovation in transportation for a half century until about 2010. And that's when demand responsive services came into being in a big way. Lyft, Uber, Via, and others. When vehicle electrification was launched, starting with Tesla and the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Bolt. And then it was a few years later, 2013, I believe, when Google began promoting its autonomous vehicle. That's what they called it. That's why we're still calling it autonomous, is because of the language they used back then. And then COVID came along to create a whole nother step change in travel behavior and transit. And there's a lot of uncertainty how this is all going to play out. We've seen, of course, huge drops in air travel, huge drops in mass transit, big drops in ride hailing. And at the same time, we've seen big increases in telecommuting and teleshopping, telehealth. So we know all of these changes are going to continue to some extent, but it's very uncertain how much so. And so some of the big questions are, will there be more multimodalism in passenger travel? Will work trips continue to be replaced by telecommuting? Will automated vehicles emerge as a major public transportation option? Will transit recover and partner with other services? And what's really interesting and important is that because the transportation sector is so complicated, the reason there wasn't all this innovation is because of the complexity of the sector, the mix of public and private entities. And so policy has so much to do with what happens going forward. And that's the name of our conference, you know, the Three Revolutions Policy Conference. So with that as context and background, we indeed have the perfect speaker to elaborate on many of these trends and to talk about what is possible. And so I have the great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker of this morning, who's a true leader in the public transportation arena. And that's Nat Ford. He's CEO of the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, but he's also the former chair of the American Public Transportation Association, APTA. He also was the CEO of transit agencies in San Francisco and Atlanta. And one of the reasons why Nat Ford is the perfect person to launch this conference is that he is a champion of multimodal transportation. He's a champion of walkable neighborhoods, of public-private partnerships, transit-oriented development. And importantly, he's actually done many of these things. You know, he has really been a leader. And actually, Jacksonville is turning out to be a leader. So he's just as testimony, he's received a bunch of awards, you know, for his remarkable leadership and innovation, including the APTA, the American Public Transportation Association's Outstanding Public Transportation Manager for 2020. He received the 2019 Thought Leader Award by the Eno Center for Transportation. And I want to say I first met Nat when we both served on the executive committee of TRB, Transportation Research Board, and now he has been promoted to be vice chair, and next year he will be the chair of TRB. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the one and only Mr. Nat Ford to our virtual stage.
Well, good morning, Daniel, and good morning to many, and good afternoon to a few also. And it's really an honor to have this opportunity to talk to you about something that I enjoy talking about, which is transit and mobility. Thank you for that introduction. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. And again, thank you for having me. It's going to be a pleasure to share some of my insights on the state of transit and mobility and what we're doing in Jacksonville as it relates to this, what I call the new mobility paradigm. As mentioned, I'm Nat Ford, and for the past 8 years, I've had the honor of serving what I believe is a very diverse and innovative team here in Jacksonville at the JTA. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the work we're doing and some of the thoughts I have about the future of transit and mobility. About this time last year, COVID-19 was just starting to impact us in Jacksonville, and things changed very quickly for us. In the span of a few weeks, we had to really revamp our entire operation. We had a number of firsts, such as blocking off seats to ensure social distancing, requiring masks for all of our employees as well as passengers, reduced services. Literally, we had to do that overnight in response to local lockdowns. And there was, a growing rate of positivity in our communities. And so it was a very unknown period. It focused us, though, on looking at how our core purpose and how we serve our customers and what we mean to our community in Northeast Florida. I know many of my peers around the country are having similar experiences, and I think we're all doing a fine job in reaching that challenge. Some of these challenges I think we're facing are temporary, but some of these will stick around for a while, and we need to be prepared for the future. Our team at the JTA, I believe, has done a great job responding to this public health emergency. I couldn't be more proud of our bus operators, the customer service staff, and everyone who's working out there every day in the front lines with the public and providing essential services. That work is continuing right now as we have shifted our attention from testing to getting seniors in our community to coronavirus vaccination sites and ensuring that everyone has equal access to transportation. We're now providing free rides to anyone who's eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine in Jacksonville. We're doing that through our bus routes, through on-demand services and our paratransit services. And I'll go a little bit deeper into what we're actually doing a bit later. Today, I do want to talk to you about how public transportation and this industry needs to move forward, because COVID-19 clearly is not the only challenge that we face. Technology has changed, customer expectations and funding models have changed, and it continues to test our knowledge of service models and strategies. So before these trials occurred, I think what we've done as the JTA is really embraced innovation, and it's helped us stay ahead of the curve in terms of these challenges. So as Dan said earlier, autonomous vehicles, automated vehicles, electrification, and a renewed focus on first and last mile solutions are clearly reshaping what we call today public transportation. And as the JTA, we have adopted what I believe is a very holistic and equity-based strategy to provide public transportation much different than what we provided in the past. And several of our peers around the country are doing the same thing in their communities as well. Give you a little bit of background. The JTA serves the largest city in the continental US by square miles. The city of Jacksonville and Duval County are incorporated together, which creates a massive 841 square mile community that serves as the economic hub of Northeast Florida. In our service area, we have rural, we have suburban, we have urban. And so we have very differing needs depending on what part of our community you happen to live. We serve a wide variety of populations, beaches, and just as far as tourists are concerned. And when you combine all of those different types of customers and service areas, it creates a very great and difficult and challenging environment for us. However, over the past 8 years, we've embraced a number of partnerships which have with the private sector, which has allowed us to really create some unique services that we provide to more closely match our customer needs. And it's that type of flexibility that I encourage, and we believe that is reshaping the way that public transportation needs to serve its customers into the future. The JTA is also distinctive in that we build roads, sidewalks, highways, and other curb-to-curb infrastructure through a very robust capital projects division. Our actual history is as the Jacksonville Expressway Authority. We were created in 1955, and we built most of the major bridges and highways in Duval County. And then later in the 70s, that's when we took on public transportation. So as an organization, we look at it from a very different perspective based on our history and our responsibilities here in our community. Most recently, with the extension of our local option gas tax in 2016, we have embarked on nearly $200 million worth of road projects to enhance the experience for everyone in our community, no matter how you choose to travel. This map you'll see is a current snapshot of those projects, which touch every corner of Jacksonville. And I think over the next decade, we will see a great deal more activity by the JTA as it relates to not just building roads and public transport, but really looking at a complete street strategy, which we're implementing now through a proper curbing, new crosswalks, intersections, and traffic signal improvements. We're installing multi-use paths and bike lanes and sidewalks on every road project that we have under our purview. And so we're very excited about the progress we've made there. Talking about the differences in our communities, you see here a photo where we built nearly 2 miles of new sidewalks in a beaches community right next to Atlantic Beach and Elementary, where now children are able to bike, skateboard, and walk along a very busy roadway to get to school. And so projects large and projects small under our purview, but this is a small one, but something we're very proud of in terms of the impact it has on our community. And over the past few years, we've built more than 20 miles of new sidewalks in our community. New sidewalks, not upgrades, but adding sidewalks in our communities. Our capital programs arm puts us in a very unique position to shape transportation planning and to integrate all means of travel, walking, biking, whether you use a car or you use our public transit services. In 2017, I think Dan mentioned that I had an opportunity to serve as the chair of the American Public Transportation Association, also known as APTA. And during my time in that position, I encouraged our industry to adopt what I call the new mobility paradigm. In my incoming speech as chair, I stated that a paradigm shift was clearly underway. And in this paradigm, we must see opportunities where others are seeing challenges. We need to double down on using technology and innovation to make this transformational change sustainable. And with that speech, I outlined 5 priorities that I thought should be front and center for our industry. And I see them really as pillars of the industry's transformation. Obviously, number 1, we need to continue with leadership and advocacy. We need to find common ground on policy, share best practices, and we need to show the decision makers in DC at what level the funding and in terms of resources and tools that we need to be very effective in our community. Priority number 2 was the workforce of the future. There has been so much change in the past 10 years in terms of our organizations and the challenges in terms of finding skilled workers, but also skilled employees that have capabilities as it relates to analytics, business intelligence, and other technology-based fields, as we mentioned earlier, with automated vehicles. And so the challenge is, how do we embrace and continue to provide our services of today, but recognize that the skill sets that we need for our employees going into the future will need to be developed, and we need to prepare them so they can thrive in this new environment of the future. Priority number 3 was leveraging big data. Years back, we focused so much, and we continue to, I think today, focus on ridership numbers, fare box recovery, miles traveled. Every agency, transit agency, collects a great deal of data related to these metrics. But the challenges are these the right metrics? And are we collecting the right data? So and my emphasis with analyzing big data and being able to make quicker decisions related to ridership and being able to really look at on-demand services, we needed to leverage big data and be able to manage and interpret big data so we can identify hotspots as it relates to safety concerns in our community, and then identifying where we find opportunities to provide different types of services and shoehorn them and tailor them for the community that needs those services. Priority number 4 was enterprise risk management. At that time, we needed to focus on cybersecurity. Clearly, with the number of attacks that government was seeing in terms of their operations from criminals related to cybersecurity, there was a need for us to continue to focus on how we bring on new technology and innovation, but also recognize that with that comes a heightened awareness and need for protections of our data-rich systems. And finally, priority 5, and this is what we're here to talk about today, is mobility integration, which I believe is the cornerstone of our industry's future. And these priorities has helped shape where the JTA is today. We do not see ourselves as a road builder or a transit agency or a combination of those two modes. We really see ourselves as mobility experts, that whether it is walking, biking, using a car, or riding our public transit system, we have a role in that holistic ecosystem. We still have a lot of questions to answer. One that continues to be on my mind is funding, and we need more funding at the federal and state level. This has been a very challenging year, and I think the CARES Act definitely helped us, but this situation and what we've gone through will impact us for years to come. It also reminded me that public transportation clearly is the lifeline for millions of people. This is their only means to advance their education, to get a shot at a decent job that provides for their families, or to have access to life-saving services and resources, be it at a medical facility or just simply going to a grocery store. During our strictest quarantine measures, the JTA was still moving somewhere between 12 to 20,000 customers a day using our fixed route service, paratransit vehicles, and other modes. A recent APTA report from January showed that in April of 2020, public transit ridership dropped by nearly 80% across the country. Now, some quickly ask, why not just shut it down and stop service completely? Well, in our particular case, those customers we were continuing to serve had no other option. And if you look at it nationally, that population represented 20% and about 37.3 million people. So there were a lot of folks who would have been left behind if we did not continue to provide services. I believe that a well-funded public transportation system is key to the social and economic success of our communities' recovery efforts and is a key in sustaining growth. What we do with that funding is critical, though, and the decisions we need to make must be informed, and they require great vision and leadership. We need to really look into the future in terms of public transportation and how we provide those services. An established business model that's centered on a 40-foot bus or a 75-foot rail car and adding bus services or rail lines is a one-size-fits-all type of solution. I think we need to use the metrics that I described earlier in terms of big data and analytics to really take a look at how we can measure our success differently. Looking in terms of the number of households that we serve within a 10-minute walk that has access to high quality public transportation and frequent public transportation. Could we measure accessibility in terms of the number of jobs that we create accessibility to from certain communities in certain neighborhoods in our community, connecting them to those jobs, and to include walking, riding, and transfers actually in that measurement? Could we measure how we increase ridership in economically challenged areas versus overall system ridership, which may look flat or actually is falling? But if we're looking at increasing ridership, are we increasing ridership in those areas that matter the most? So I think what has been the past has been measuring ourselves in terms of the number of people who get on each bus or each rail car. but I think we really need to look at a measurement that integrates all of the multimodal mobility activity that occurs in our communities, be it on bus, rail, bicycle, scooters, pedestrian activity, first and last mile services, taxis, TNCs, you name it. We need to have it all working in unison. And I think the public transportation provider has to be able to help with that integration. I think we need to move into integrated business models where different modes, different vehicles, and partnerships with private providers actually are encouraged, and we enhance the quality of life for our passengers. And these private providers cannot be looked at as competitors, but I think as allies as we develop those potential partnerships. In terms of the JTA, just in terms of our own portfolio, I think you can see in this video that we have traditional fixed route service, we have our paratransit services, we have express service, we have the St. Johns River Ferry, the automated people mover, the Skyway, our First Coast Flyer BRT network, as well as other mobility options. And we are continuing to find new ways to integrate alternative mobility solutions using the private sector and using data to drive those changes that take us and transition us from traditional modes to the modes of the future. Our bus rapid transit network is a big part of our growth, and now the JTA operates the largest BRT network in the Southeast. We call it the First Coast Flyer. We currently have 3 routes in operation which connect our downtown core, downtown Jacksonville, to some of the busiest corridors in the north sectors, east and southeast parts of our city. In 2020, we broke ground on the last initial leg of our BRT network, the Orange Line, which this is a 13-mile route which heads southwest to the growing Orange Park area, and it directly connects to downtown Jacksonville. And so with that completion, we'll have 57.5 miles. Future improvements will include more dedicated bus lanes and additional routes as our community grows. And where we've installed BRT routes, it's clear economic growth has followed. We've tracked roughly $1 billion in new permit applications within a half a mile of our First Coast Flyer routes. And when you zoom out to a 2-mile radius, that number jumps to nearly $3 billion. Now, during this journey, we've made technology a centerpiece by launching mobile apps for ticketing, route planning, real-time passenger information, and passenger employee safety, all while offering Wi-Fi on every one of our buses. And as we leverage technology, I challenge my team to think outside the box to improve our current services, including integrating mobility solutions from the private sector. Let me tell you a little bit about what we call beachside buggies. So when I first arrived at the JTA in late 2012, we ran a underutilized, expensive beaches trolley service that was more a novelty than anything else. It was the JTA's answer to providing beach service to some of our constituents. Now, while it was well-intentioned, it clearly did not meet our customers' demands. The trolley operated 3 blocks away from the beach's main street, and it operated much like a regular fixed route service. So in the summer of 2017, we eliminated the trolley and began sponsoring a local startup called Beachside Buggies. And for the JTA, literally pennies on the dollar, Beachside Buggies operates 12 months of the year by using 8 to 14 passenger electric golf carts, and it is an on-demand service that is used through a mobile app. I can share during the months of the pandemic, this service was averaging over 6,500 customers per month. Most importantly, it picks up and drops off where the customer wants to go, not a fixed route bus service that we provide as the JTA. So all they have to do is tip the driver if they'd like, and the ride is actually free. And so we went from a 3-month seasonal service to a 365-day-a-year service, literally for pennies on a dollar. It's much more customer friendly, and it fits the actual beach community with tourists and actual residents and folks that are looking to go to simply a bar or a restaurant as part of their vacation. Another mobility option is Ready Ride. We launched that in December of 2018. Similarly, like Beachside Buggies, Ready Ride replaced a very expensive legacy service. We had Community shuttles that mirrored fixed routes, but for an extra fee, it would deviate to pick up or drop off a customer at certain locations. Again, well-intentioned when it was launched many years ago, but not practical today. The shuttle had limited distances as it could deviate, and only certain deviations, a number of deviations per hour. And the booking had to be done well in advance. Well, we replaced that with the Ready Ride program, which we believe truly met our customers' first and last mile needs with none of the restrictions that the community shuttle had. Ready Ride is provided through another public-private partnership and now serves 11 neighborhood zones. Customers can book their trip with just a 2-hour advance notice, and trips can go to one of our bus stops in terms of our fixed route service, or that service could be curb to curb as long as they remain in the service zone. And so we're very proud of that service. Ready Ride has also been a vehicle for us to help the most vulnerable in our community. Jacksonville, unfortunately, has some neighborhoods that are cut off from grocery stores. You're all familiar with the term food deserts. These are areas that there are no stores where our citizens can find fresh produce, meats, and other staples. So in a partnership with the city of Jacksonville to fund a pilot program last year, through our Ready Ride service, residents can now receive free rides to 7 area grocery stores in the challenged Northwest Jacksonville community. It has helped hundreds of families last year, especially elderly families, get to the grocery store that was literally out of their reach. I'm happy to say just last week, the city of Jacksonville saw fit to continue to fund this program and actually expand its boundaries. And so we're very excited about that partnership. Ready Ride is also helping us with seniors who need to get to COVID-19 vaccine sites. We provide free rides through our bus routes to COVID-19 vaccination sites, but we're also allowing Ready Ride customers to get that free ride in neighborhoods where a site is located. We have created 3 new Ready Ride zones in February, and as eligibility expands, we'll expand our footprint as needed. This week, we entered a new partnership with a local shared ride company, Z-Trip, to provide more access to vaccine locations as well. And as you can see, we've even relocated bus stops to drop people off closer to the entrances of the vaccination sites. Simply put, access to transportation will not be a barrier to the COVID-19 vaccination in Jacksonville. Even during this challenging year, our teams pushed ahead with innovative projects. Nowhere is that more evident than the solution we have developed to address the future of our elevated monorail system in downtown Jacksonville, known as the Skyway. Built 31 years ago, the Skyway is a small-scale people mover that connects both sides of our downtown, and over the years, it never really got the opportunity to reach its full potential. In 2015, we worked with the city and our stakeholders to find a solution, and we felt that the Skyway really has a great deal of value. It just needed to be upgraded and adapted to new technology in light of all of the development that is occurring in downtown Jacksonville. So for the past 5 years, we've been working very closely with our autonomous vehicle technology to develop what we call the Ultimate Urban Circulator, or U2C, which will replace the Skyway in the years ahead. The U2C will utilize automation to provide an on-demand and autonomous connected transportation network, quadrupling the service area from a 2.5-mile segment we have now to over 10 miles, and increasing the capacity to serve nearly 3 times the number of customers we serve today. The first phase, the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, is fully funded, and it's nearing the end of an active procurement process. We hope to award our contract later this year. The JTA has received a $12.5 million build grant to get that project off the ground. This will be a 3-mile at-grade stretch of the U2C, which will connect our urban core to the sports and entertainment complex where the Jacksonville Jaguars play. This AV-D-BOM partnership will be awarding the contract later this summer, and future phases are also in development as I speak. As we develop the U2C, our Automation and Innovation Division are also deeply involved in testing and working with AV manufacturers and other connected and smart traffic infrastructure through our AV Test and Learn program. In 2020, we welcomed the newest vehicles to that program. The Ollie 2.0 is the first 3D printed all-electric AV manufactured in the United States. The EV Star is an electric paratransit vehicle with an automation kit by Perrone Robotics. It's street legal and already ADA compliant. It allows us to advance our testing to other areas outside of our test and learn facilities. And through our test and learn program, we've been able to establish a local partnership with Florida State College at Jacksonville that is allowing us to use their commercial driver's license test track to work with their faculty to develop an AV-related curriculum and to develop workforce training to prepare that next generation of transportation professionals. I think the JTA, along with some of our peers around the nation, are leading the way for public transportation as it relates to autonomous vehicles. This technology is rapidly advancing, so it's critical that we begin to understand this technology today and how we can leverage it on behalf of our citizens going into the future. Before I move on, I want to go back to COVID-19 for a moment and highlight another innovative partnership we had this year with the world-renowned Mayo Clinic. This time last year, the Mayo Clinic leadership asked if we could use our autonomous vehicles to help them move COVID-19 tests from their drive-through testing sites to their laboratories, which is about a mile away on the other side of their Jacksonville campus. We were working with them at that time on other possible uses as part of our test and learn program when this idea came up. Our automation team jumped right in and within 1 week launched this service at a level 4 autonomy. That means no attendant, a control center that obviously will watch the operation of the vehicles, but this was clearly driverless service that was being provided. From April to July, we moved more than 30,000 COVID-19 test samples from their parking lot drive-through test site to their laboratories that were about a mile away. And other than that command center, these vehicles drove without operators. We gained a considerable amount of experience and knowledge through a real-world application of this technology. And more importantly, it took some pressure off the healthcare professionals so they could focus on keeping our community healthy during this pandemic. And I just want to take a moment to just say hats off to our automation and innovation team for taking a chance to innovate and make a difference. Finally, I'd like to quickly speak to you about how mobility options that I talked about earlier are all converging in one central location, the new Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center at La Villa. This is a 67,000 square foot facility that serves as our main transfer hub and serves other mobility options like our Skyway, our paratransit services, rideshare, and regional services through a connection with Greyhound and an intercity bus terminal. This is a LEED silver building, opened up May 4th. It has the capacity to serve more than 42,000 customers a day. Relocating this hub would have been difficult enough during normal times, but we decided to move forward and open it up during the height of the global pandemic, which was not an easy task, but it was critical because of the connectivity for all of Northeast Florida and really the Southeast part of the United States, because as I mentioned, it connects to an intercity bus terminal through a pedestrian bridge where our JTA services are connected with Greyhound, Megabus, and Red Coach lines. Now, this facility is built for the future and to grow as our services grow, and it includes the future possibility of passenger and commuter rail in Northeast Florida. It is clearly an economic catalyst, a transit-oriented development that has already influenced residential and commercial development in the La Villa area. And our frontline teams, I think, have done a great job, a tremendous job of adapting to the changes due to COVID-19 and all of the normal challenges that we're facing, you face when you're opening up a facility like this. So as I leave you this morning, I want to encourage you to continue to take a look at how our agencies and our communities continue to rely on public transportation. I would encourage you to talk to your local lawmakers regarding more support for public transportation and funding for what I call a holistic mobility system, and to continue to embrace new mobility services and technology. If you want to learn more about what the JTA is doing here in Jacksonville, please look on your favorite social media channel. We're there, and or visit our website at www.jta.fla.com. And once again, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. And Dan, if it's appropriate, I'm available for any questions that the audience may have.
All I can say is bravo,
Thank you.
Nat. Okay, so I'm going to give you our a virtual award here, the Three Revolutions Award, because you epitomize exactly what we're talking about. Is how do we advance these revolutions and sharing and automation, electrification, and especially how do we bring it together?
Right.
In the next session, they're going to talk about automation, so they'll pick up on some of what you talked about, and in the following sessions about partnerships, and we'll talk more about that. Let me ask a first question here, and that is, you talked about need more funding, and I mean, in many ways that's very obvious, but at the same time, you talked about multimodalism, partnerships.
That's right.
How should this, there's a lot of people that just want the money to be handed over to transit agencies and that's it. Do you think that there should be some kind of conditions associated with it, or what do you suggest?
Over my career, quite often you hear, government would run better, or public transportation would run better if we ran it like a business. And, I've been very fortunate in terms of, over the years, having an entrepreneurial spirit in terms of the teams that I've created. And so while federal funding, state funding, and local funding has always been there, I think my strategy has always been not to manage with my hand held out, and to really challenge that perception in terms of managing and needing to have such a great deal of support, financial support, to successfully achieve our mission. As I mentioned earlier, when I talked about the beachside buggies, or I talk about the community shuttle services, we had the data that clearly showed that to provide those services was very, very costly. And if we were not courageous enough to try new things, or innovative enough to try new things, we would need a greater and greater and a greater subsidy to continue to run those inefficient services. So I believe, while I will say more funding is always great, I think there has to be the other end of the equation, which is, what are you doing to innovate and control costs? And frankly, in our case, provide a much better service to our constituents and our citizens. And frankly, I think I said in my presentation, literally for pennies on the dollar. So for decades, we ran the beaches trolley for 3 months, fixed route. I don't know of many people who can get a surfboard on a bus in a beaches community, along with their beach chair and their cooler and things of that nature. So and also, kind of the nature of tourists, providing that service was really just a symbolic thing. It really didn't focus on the ridership. It was more symbolic in terms of JTA's contribution to the beaches community and service, versus really looking at what would be more customer friendly and fit the bill in terms of that community. So you'll never get me to say I couldn't use more funding, but I've always had the perspective that, let me show you what I'm doing with the funding I already received, and show you where I'm operating in a much more efficient, customer-focused, citizen-oriented service model. And then it makes it a whole lot easier, I think, to receive the funding that is competitive in some cases, because, and I'd add one more thing, also because I'm applying a holistic approach. And we're not providing an approach that just focuses on public transit riders. We're looking at a holistic approach that appeals to everyone in our community, whether you walk, bike, drive a car and park, and use our road system, or you use public transportation. So Dan, it's not just more money, it's just what are you doing with what you receive right now, and are you being creative and innovative with that? And I think it leads to those private sector partnerships. It leads to additional support from your local government, your state government, and the federal government.
So that leads to this question. Let me dig in a little bit on this partnership idea. There are a lot of funding formulas and funding rules that limit the potential for these partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about that? Not necessarily just the finance part of it, but how you see these. I mean, you gave great examples. Maybe you can generalize a little bit,
right,
for some of the others about this idea of partnerships?
Right. So one of the things that I've been very concerned with, and just last week, we have developed at the JTA something called the MOVE plan, and it's our, phase one is the post-pandemic recovery for the agency, and phase two will be our longer strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And nowadays, when you talk strategic plans, 3 to 5 years is a long time, but in this dynamic environment. But one of the things we're very concerned about is, as we encourage these partnerships, be it beach buggies, or we encourage our partnership with Go Tuckin. Downtown, we have a partnership with Go Tuckin, for example. When we were sitting there analyzing our ridership, as we were talking about how we were going to increase ridership after the pandemic, we institutionally, started talking about fixed route, paratransit, and those modes. And our staff, unfortunately, in that discussion actually left out what we're doing with Go Tuckin and beach buggies and Ready Ride. Well, I think there should be a measurement that includes all of those services that I sponsor or I facilitate or I promote to happen in our community. And that's where I get to this big data measurement, which really looks at, am I improving mobility? So what is that mobility factor that I need to think of or develop in terms of measuring the true success of the JTA as it relates to our mission, which is to improve mobility in Northeast Florida. And so in some cases, because of the NTD reporting or the process that we've developed from 30, 40 years ago, that we developed to measure my success or measure the JTA's success, I don't think those are the right measurements in this particular environment, in this particular day and age. The customers I'm carrying every day now, who are actually supporting our hospitals, supporting restaurants and grocery stores that many individuals are able to benefit from and be able to work remotely from home. These individuals that I'm providing services to are critical. And so, is that not all customers are created equal, I would say. And I think we need to really look at mobility in a much broader, holistic standpoint and come up with measurements that measure our success beyond how many people we carry on a 40-foot bus and a 75-foot rail car. How many sidewalks? Think about the sidewalks and the connectivity for those young kids in the beaches community that we provided so that they can walk to school or ride a bike safely in our community and in Florida, which has had a challenge with pedestrian safety. And so I think there needs to be a different metric in terms of measuring public mobility that we provide.
Well, a lot of what you're saying is really resonating. And then I just discovered when I pressed the Q&A button, there's a whole long list of questions for you. There's a new system here. Okay, so here's a good one from James Giller. He says, in terms of integrating modes, do you experience private companies' reluctance to share some data about service performance? And if so, what are the consequences?
Right. So right now we are working with Uber and we're working with Lyft, and we do understand that has been a challenge for some communities and some agencies. But the partnership with Ready Ride, private operator, we actually work with them in terms of managing the trips. Same thing with beachside buggies. We have not had a problem collecting their data and working with them in partnership. And we don't expect the same thing in terms of, Uber, for example. We've been in discussions with them over the last year, I say 6 months to a year or so. And so I understand that may be a challenge, but we have not encountered that just yet. And so we're excited about continuing these partnerships with the private sector. Let them do what they do best and let us do what we do best. But our job is to facilitate across the spectrum of modes and services.
Okay, that's great. There's a question here. It's from Sacramento, from James Boyle. Particularly interested in your beaches buggy concept in terms of microtransit. And so he says we have a very successful microtransit smart ride service here in Sacramento, and they're interested in the beach buggy. But I think, can you again generalize a little bit? Because the reality of microtransit is, in most places, it's not been very successful. Ridership's not been very high. It's been expensive.
Right.
kind of, what are some lessons learned that others might use?
Well, I think, and that is a good point. I mean, initially when we started with Ready Ride, we got very concerned because the actual usage was significantly higher than what we expected. But what we found is the actual avoidance of expense, the actual cost of the service compared to running that fixed route community shuttle with deviations, financially it worked to our benefit, and we needed to properly price the trip. So initially, I think our first round, we didn't properly price the trip as it related to Ready Ride, got oversubscribed, and then we had to, it started out as a pilot, and then we had to make the adjustment. And I would say this, using pilots as a way to kind of test these things out, just for the private sector as well as for the agency, is perfect sense. And I think the utilization of pilots allows us to fine tune things, communicating that to the public to ensure that they understand there will be adjustments as we move forward. When I talk about beach buggies, though, the interesting thing is it was a historic understanding that we were going to put this out every 3 months, in the summer months, run this beaches trolley, and no one was riding the service. And you look 3 blocks over, and here's this group of, young upstarts who are starting this beachside buggy service. We started watching what they were doing. They were going door to door, taking people from restaurant to restaurant, hotel to restaurant, beach to hotel, those types of trips, which we could not serve at all using a 40-foot bus. And at that time, we had nothing other than a 40-foot bus in our portfolio. So I would say the beachside buggy really was the kind of the aha moment for us. And we were able to actually fund them, as I said, for minimal amount through a sponsorship, right? Through a sponsorship, we were able to fund them operating the service in their community. They were able to add their vehicles. We dealt with ADA by we purchased ADA accessible electric golf carts for them. And when it was all said and done, all of the impediments that we kind of looked at in the past were eliminated, and people got much better service in that beaches area. Our cost is a flat cost and a flat sponsorship that we provide. Their drivers actually make their living through the tips that they receive from the actual customers. And that was the beginning of that, I think, that epiphany in terms of diversify our portfolio. We just need to organize it, make sure it operates at a certain standard, it's clean, it's safe. And once it meets those requirements, we will sponsor it, particularly if it offsets our costs.
Great case study. So it was a very simple solution, but something that unfortunately we weren't able to grasp for some time here in our community. I see Molly coming on, meaning we probably should end. But, I want to know, I just came to appreciate that for the questions now, people can upvote which questions they like. And that's really a great little feature here. So let me read one, and we'll not ask Nat to respond unless he has a really quick response, just because it got 15 votes for it. It says, how may we change the conversation to accessibility rather than mobility as our objective? Isn't our mobility obsession a symptom of building for cars, not people? How to overcome? I mean, that's really big. So if you have a really quick answer.
I think at any given moment, and depending on what part of the country you're in, what city you're in, any given moment, someone's walking, biking. One particular day they may be driving. In other cases, they may be actually using public transportation. We do not, at this juncture, the JTA is not getting into what are your mode choices. We just recognize that there are those various different modes, and for them to be successful, you need a holistic decision as it relates to infrastructure investment, funding, and quality of service. And so rather than having one mode compete against the other, we believe this holistic solution, all modes benefit when we have that holistic approach and not have it so siloed. And so we're not walking into the argument of whether folks should drive or walk or bike or ride public transportation. We're not at that juncture in our community.
I'd add, just to add to what you said, is that what you said earlier is about metrics. And I think that using data and metrics will play a huge role in figuring out which services to provide where and how to really improve accessibility, with different modes.
One last thing, Dan, and go to to that question. What we found in our community, ridership was declining before the pandemic. Why? We were doing an exceptional job in terms of accessibility to jobs and opportunity, particularly with Amazon, which set up a number of distribution centers in our community. For many members of our community, getting that job at Amazon and purchasing a vehicle was not because they didn't like public transit. It's just from a cultural standpoint, that vehicle was operating 7 days a week. It was being shared by a nephew, an uncle, family members. And so there was greater mobility in that particular case. So, that's where we get into, we make sure that metrics don't pull against each other in terms of measuring the JTA success. If I'm doing a great job, or we're doing a great job, we're creating greater opportunity for members of our community. And in some cases, they may make a different choice in terms of their transportation modes. And so we got to look at all of it, the entire spectrum, and not one against the other.
Nat, I'm a disciple. That was great. I loved what you said. It fits so well with what we're trying to think about, how to make truly sustainable transportation, how these three revolutions can be brought together to do that. So thank you so much. Fabulous talk and great responses. So thank you so much. And
thank you, Dan.
And continued good luck in Jacksonville. And
all right,
we need to spread the word.
Thank you so much, Dan, for the opportunity to talk. I have got a great team here in Jacksonville, and I just get a chance to represent their work.
Bravo.